We love our pets. They're our best friends as we navigate life's ups and downs with a wag or a purr just when we need it. The Royal Veterinary College is there for our pets, home to Europe's largest small animal referrals hospital, with over 200 specialists providing expert care 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. The bond between a pet and their person is worth fighting for, and that's the belief that inspired the RVC Memory Tree, a beautiful handmade sculpture standing in the heart of the RVC Small Animal Referrals Hospital, adorned with gold, silver and copper leaves, each one engraved with the name of a beloved pet, and each one funding the extraordinary work happening there every day. For just £10 a month, you can dedicate a leaf in the name of your pet, celebrating your pet's life, whilst also helping to fund life-saving treatment and care for animals in need. Visit rvcact.com/memory tree to dedicate a leaf today and let your pet's memory live on.
There's nothing like my American Express Platinum card. I love that I can earn hotel credits when I travel. I can also earn Resi credits, so you know I'm hitting the restaurants everyone's talking about. Plus, with the digital entertainment credit, I'm even more excited to catch my favorite shows. All in all, I can access over $3,500 in annual value with benefits and eligible purchases across travel, entertainment, and more. Learn more at americanexpress.com/explore-platinum. Enrollment requirements, monthly and other limits and terms apply.
Hello and welcome to the Book Club Review. I'm Kate, and this is the podcast about book clubs and the books that get people talking. There are people who read books, and there are people for whom this isn't enough, and they also start podcasts about reading books. Now that the wave of publicity around the new George Saunders novel Vigil has subsided, and readers have had a chance to experience the book for themselves, it feels only right to convene a small council of the especially opinionated. Joining me today, a couple of dear podcast friends, whose voices may be familiar to many, Jenny King and Sarah Kemp from the Bookcast Club. Saunders doing capitalism, climate and the afterlife in one swing? Sold, said the folk at Oprah Daily. But what do my fellow book podcasters think? We're also considering Leo Tolstoy's micro-masterpiece, The Death of Ivan Ilyich, cited by Saunders as a key influence. It's considered to be one of the finest novellas, but what did our mini book club make of it? Is it one you should carve out time for? Find out our thoughts, plus our recent reads and recommendations, all coming up here on the Book Club Review. Jenny, Sarah, welcome to you both. It's so lovely to have you here. All my best friends are podcasters, it seems. The only problem is I hardly get to see any of them in person, and so I thought maybe convening a book club was the way to go. Jenny, you're dialing in from Norfolk. I've been hugely admiring your recent library bookshelf project you've been installing. How is that going?
We're getting there. It's taken a very long time. I don't know how long I've been documenting it for on Instagram, but I think it's been at least 6 months, but they are looking very good.
And have you had thoughts about how you're going to organise it, like alphabetical, subject, or are you keen to just stick those books back on those shelves? There's a question.
I'm quite chaotic, so now I'm definitely just chuck it on. It's replacing a bookcase where I used to triple stack them. So you can imagine what it's like. It's just chaotic.
I was in a bookshop a while ago and they had something I have seen in a few places, but it's basically double shelves. So there's a sliding shelf in front of a shelf. I know. Ooh. And then you can slide them. It's that gorgeous one down in Chelsea. John Sando, they have them there.
Oh, I've never been there.
Oh my God, they're amazing. But anyway, recently things have reached a saturation point here where for the first time I started to think to myself, do I now need a double shelf system?
My husband's very lucky that I had not encountered the double shelf system.
I bet they don't come cheap. And also, is it because I'm just not prepared to do the hard work of a clear out that, to me, the easier solution seems to be to just install more bookshelves? I think I'm not really digging deep enough.
The only solution, surely.
Sarah, you're dialing in from the Netherlands, although as listeners will be able to tell from your accent, you're originally from Australia. How long is it now you've been in Holland?
Hello, thanks for having me on. I am Australian indeed. I moved here in 2017. I say 7 years all the time, and I just recently realised it's actually nearly 10 years.
Do you get a good supply of, I imagine it's pretty easy to get English books there.
Yes, it's very easy. I'm not a big book collector. Reading books and owning books, I think, are two separate hobbies. I'm not as much into the book buying, mostly because I move a lot. So I have gotten over the idea of having a lot of books because they're very heavy. People who move a lot will understand that, I'm sure. I have a very small book collection. 30 would be probably the amount that I have, maybe 40. I certainly won't be triple walling or whatever the verb is, I'm not sure. But I can attest that Jenny's shelves are amazing.
And outside of Vigil, which we're going to come on to discuss, what have you had on the go recently?
I just last week started Once We Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaughey. One of her books was longlisted for the Women's Prize this year, and that had too many holds on at the library, so I got the other one. And I'm listening to the audiobook, and it's really good. Haven't read anything by her before. Really atmospheric. The narration is awesome. For anyone who's listening enjoys writers like Hannah Kent or like Sarah Moss, I think you would really enjoy it. I'm finding it really absorbing.
Jenny, how about you? What have you been reading recently?
I am currently reading Kiran Millwood Hargrave's latest novel, Almost Life. She usually writes historical fiction, and this one is also historical fiction, but it's in more recent times, like late 70s, early 80s, and it's following the lives of Erica, who's an English lit student, and Laure, who's a French girl that she meets in Paris on her gap year. Since starting it, I've read other people describe it as a sapphic one day, which I wasn't mentally prepared for, but I'm halfway through now, so I'm going to keep going. I am really enjoying it. It's struggling slightly from being set in a more modern time period, and I'd say the only reason I necessarily clock that it's set in late 80s, early 90s is because she's mentioning things that I know happened in that time period. So yeah, I'm intrigued to keep going with it. Really pleasant surprise, which I didn't know, is that a big chunk of it is set in Norwich. And she goes to UEA in Norwich, and she's mentioning all these places that I know really well. So that's a nice reading experience.
That's always fun when that happens. I just finished Ben Lerner's Transcription, new, quite buzzy.
Never heard of this.
How funny. So I was blank at both people that you're reading, and you guys are the same on Ben Lerner. He wrote a number of books that are all incredibly critically well regarded. There was Leaving the Atocha Station. I can't remember what the one after that was. One about time, 10:04, I think it was, which I read. And I know, the Topeka, something about Topeka. I quite liked him when I've read him before, but I wouldn't say I rushed to seek him out. But it felt like this one was quite interesting, and there was a bit of a buzz about it, and I was curious. And also, because of my birthday, I got a Kobo. Do you know about Kobos?
Do we know about Kobos?
Now, this is not even the first conversation that Jenny and I are having about Kobos today.
Because again, I was talking to someone the other day about just a bookish person, and she didn't know about Kobos. I was like, yeah, they're a lovely Canadian company. Yeah. It's your way of getting out from underneath the thumb of Amazon for ebooks. A company called Rakuten. They're a big company, but they seem to have much more of an indie ethos, and the whole thing seems much more... You don't feel guilty in quite the same way. And similarly, 3 million ebooks they've got on the catalogue. And this lovely little device, which is just so much nicer than the Amazon. It's like a bit thicker and a bit nicer to hold. And it has all these charming details in the interface. Like when you fold a corner of a page, it actually looks like a dog-eared page. So
yeah,
little
pretty cool.
Things like that, right? And the font's slightly nicer. And I wanted a book that I could read in a day because it was my birthday. And so I downloaded for my first book, Transcription by Ben Lerner. And the other thing, I don't know how you feel about this, but the front of the Kobo, when it's at rest, it displays the book that you're currently reading. If you're not in the book, it just displays a blank screen that says sleep on it. But when you're in a book, the book that's on the front of the Kobo is the book that you're reading. Now, right now, I'm reading Ben Lerner. That's great, really literary fiction, highbrow. I don't mind anybody saying that I'm reading Ben Lerner. But there are other books that I read where I would be slightly less enthusiastic.
Cover. I'm going to have to go find my Kobo now. Hold on.
There's a whole conversation, Kate, that you have to get into about Kobo covers. So I've got a plain blue one. When you lift the case off the thing, it unlocks itself, like Jenny's just showed you. And Jenny's is really cool. Can you show Kate how it sits itself
Hers
up?
has got this kind of almost slightly like geometric fold. Very nice.
Only Belle can do this. Me and Jenny can't do this.
Work out how... No, I cannot demonstrate.
It'll sit itself up. Now, I want to ask you though, Kate, do you have a Kobo colour? Because this is a conversation we have in our podcast chat.
Yes.
So I'm the only one without a Kobo colour. I've got a black and white one, and Jenny and Belle both have a Kobo colour. And so there's quite a lot of group pressure for me to. Bella's the other person who is also on the podcast that Jenny and I have.
I tell you, when it comes into its own, having colour is when you're scrolling through the thumbnails, because that just feels more fun than what I'm used to on Amazon, where they're always black and white. Yeah, you can just get into the covers a bit more. But the other thing I was thinking, and I think this speaks to the way that they've really thought a lot about how they design these Kobos, is just this idea, the thing it displays is the book you're reading. And what I liked about that is that if you're carrying a physical book, of course, that's what people see. Unless you do like the Japanese do and wrap it in newspaper or something. But that's actually very true to the real life experience of reading a printed book, is that your e-reader would also show the cover. Little things like that, I just like the way that they thought about them.
Yeah, it's nice. Can I also say the Kobo, just for people who don't know Kobo, the Libby software, so, like Overdrive and Libby, that whole thing, that is native to Kobo. So it will work best on Kobo. So if you're someone who uses Libby or Overdrive, it works pretty seamlessly, I find. So it's better than Amazon, the Kindle. Or
straight to your Kobo. Yeah. It's
great.
And
final thing I noticed when I finished the Ben Lerner is I just loved the fact that I could get to the end of the book, I could swipe the last page, and I didn't immediately get this pop-up window telling me I had to rate and review it and suggesting all these other things that I might want to read, which you always then have to close, because often you want to look at the end matter, you want to read the acknowledgements, or even you just want to sit with your feelings about the book for a bit and have a think. And this doesn't do that. You get to the end and it's like, oh, you can linger on the last page. You can stay here as long as you want. That's absolutely fine. And I was like, I love this so much. Yeah. And the Ben Lerner, just in case anyone was wondering what I thought about it, it's a very clever book. It's a very interesting book. It's about a writer who's going to interview a very famous cultural figure, a much older man. He's in his late 80s. And we learn that this artist has been a mentor to the writer. He goes and then he drops his phone in some water and it stops working. And he's got nothing to record this interview that he's going to do. And he can't quite bring himself to admit it when he's actually at the man's house. And so he pretends to record, thinking to himself, okay, I will just remember it, I'll make notes. And so the transcription is partly about that conversation and his rendering of that conversation and the reaction of people when they find out that it wasn't recorded or transcribed verbatim. It was actually composed after the fact. But then it also spins out in really interesting ways into lots of other areas of life. And I think particularly right now, where there's this sense that we can't necessarily trust information as it comes to us, can't quite be sure about anything anymore. It's really playing very cleverly with all of that and the idea of these digital devices being interfaces between us and the world and what happens if you take that away. So I found it a little bit frustrating when I was reading it, but then I finished it. I was like, oh, that's such an interesting book. And I immediately wanted to go back and read it again. So I think it would be really good for book club. And also it felt a bit pricey. Wouldn't be at all surprised if it doesn't pop up on the Booker long list. It just felt like that sort of book.
I have to say, Kate, just read what you said earlier about how you didn't know our books. You often say books that I don't know about, even though I feel like I've got my finger on the pulse, but you often surprise me. So that's just one of many examples.
But then there are just so many books, aren't there? This is what I love so much about these conversations with readers, is that every person's reading landscape is different. And in these conversations and in swapping notes, you find out like, oh, something you might want to give a try, or you're like, yeah, don't bother with that one. You're like, great. Don't have to worry. It could be very helpful. True. And just before we go on to our book club book, tell us a bit more about the Bookcast Club. It's been going for a few years now, hasn't it? And I feel like it's ebbed and flowed according to your busy lives and what you've all had going on. But I love the way that you've managed to keep it going, and it feels like it's always evolving. Tell listeners about it.
Yeah, always evolving is a good way to describe it. I think we've just gone through a pivotal ebb and flow moment. There's three of us. There's me and Sarah and Belle, based on completely opposite sides of the world. So we've had to navigate the fact that we all have busy day jobs and sleep at different times. So yeah, we've had to move with what feels most comfortable with us, basically. But yeah, the podcast's been going for nearly 10 years now, which I cannot believe. We started in 2017 and we've changed hosts a few times. Me and Sarah are fairly well and long established now. But yeah, we're a relaxed, chatty book podcast. And I guess the idea is for us to create the feel of just really good bookish chat with friends over a cup of tea. And that's really what we aim for. We're all really big readers and read quite widely and just like to dig into those books with each other, basically. We're all about making literary conversation feel welcoming and fun.
And I love it because it's one of those shows where when you listen, you feel like you're just sitting down in the room with you. And then I often want to message. You want to chip in. And they're the best shows.
Absolutely. Do message us. We love it.
Yeah, it's nice. I like the message that you sent us when you did. I can always really hear your voice in my head when you. So I have I've spent so many hours listening to your voice. I know the kind of the way that you say things, so it's funny. If I read anything that you ever write, I can hear your voice exactly in my head. Always lots to talk about whenever we see you.
And it's I suppose when we put up the shows, they presented as quite polished, but we're all quite honest about how difficult it is making them behind the scenes, especially when you're on your own. None of us use studios or production people. You're like me, you're doing the editing. It's all like bedroom stuff. And in a way that feels increasingly rare to me. And so, yeah, they're really important to me, these connections that I have with people who I feel are doing the same thing. They're out there, they're independent, making a show because it's something they want to put into the world and maybe a conversation that they feel they're not hearing anywhere else, right? That's certainly what motivates me. Long may they continue.
Yes, for as long as we can. Hard work.
My hair's getting greyer.
When we come back, we're getting into our book club chat about Vigil by George Saunders. But first, if you want to get more from your reading, may I suggest you come and join the book club review on Patreon. There's so much there, from extra episodes with Laura, Phil, and various bookish people I meet, to our community chat threads, where our wonderful subscribers get together to swap recommendations. We're currently doing a group read of Robert Caro's classic book, The Power Broker, which is about Robert Moses, the man who shaped New York. It might surprise you to learn that a 1,200-page book about transport infrastructure is rapidly becoming one of my all-time favourite reads, but if you've already read Caro, you'll be welcoming me into the fan club. And speaking of clubs, have you been meaning to join a book club? Ours meets on the last Sunday of the month at 9 p.m. UK time over Zoom, with a catch-up recording posted for anyone who can't make the live session. In July, we're reading The Makioka Sisters by Junichiro Tanizaki, widely acclaimed as a 20th century classic. In August, it's Transcription, the new novel from Ben Lerner, and in September, reading Lolita in Tehran by Iranian author and teacher of English literature, Azar Nafisi. Each month, subscribers get an introductory episode about the book to get you started. And finally, if you can't manage a paid subscription right now, you can sign up as a free member, where you'll get my reading diaries and monthly reading wrap-ups. I would love to have you be part of our community of readers, all united by our love of good discussions about books. Okay, back to the show. Okay, to our book club and the new novel from George Saunders. Before I do a little bit more of a dive into the book and what it's actually about, I just wanted to take a quick sidebar to talk about expectations. Have you ever read a book called The Phantom Toll Booth by Norman Juster? Classic children's book.
No, I have heard of this, thank God, but no, I haven't read it.
It's really good. I read it with my youngest not so long ago, and I had a great time. I'm not sure how she felt about it, because it's quite educational in lots of ways, and she's very dubious about that. But the point is, this kid, Milo, he gets given this toll booth, and he drives through it, and he is suddenly transported to this imaginary land. He decides to go to this place called Dictionopolis, but before he can get there, he has to go through a place called Expectations, and he discovers that expectations isn't always that helpful a place to be. With George Saunders in particular, I think he's an author that we're all bringing something to. Certainly for me, he's been a big part of my literary landscape. And since I think we did the 10th of December, his story collection for book club, probably 15 years ago or something. And I've read almost everything he's ever written, more or less. Yeah. How about you guys?
I've never read anything by George Saunders. I have thought about reading Lincoln in the Bardo, but I think I've decided before I've even picked anything up is that he's perhaps too experimental for me. This has been an experience to read Vigil, and I'm excited to chat this through.
Sarah, how about you?
I also haven't read many of his things. I've read Lincoln in the Bardo. He is more one of those authors that I've seen around a lot. So I've actually seen a lot of interviews of his. So my impression of him, my expectations are actually more based on him as a person. I really like him in interviews. He always strikes me as a very thoughtful and considered person. I have a much stronger impression of him as a person than of his books.
Yeah, and it's interesting because he's written brilliant pieces on politics for The New Yorker. He wrote this amazing essay on Trump rally that he went to in 2016, which is one of my favourite things I've ever read of his. It's absolutely extraordinary. But so he will wade into those waters. And also, I think, as a figure who very generous about sharing his writing practice and helping other people. He's got a flourishing Substack where he's teaching people. And this is also what he does professionally. He's a creative writing professor at Syracuse University. So, yeah, he's quite out there as a cultural figure. I think he is generally, I think it's fair to say, much loved and revered. Okay, well, putting our expectations about George Saunders, or lack thereof, to one side, what is Vigil about? Not for the first time, in fact, for the 343rd time, Jill Dole Blaine finds herself crashing down to earth, head first, rear up, to accompany her latest charge into the afterlife. She soon realises, however, that this man is not quite like the others. For powerful oil tycoon KJ Boon will not be consoled because he has nothing to regret. He lived a big, bold life, and the world is better for it, isn't it? As death approaches, a cast of worldly and otherworldly visitors arrive. Crowds of people and animals, alive and dead, materialise. Birds swarm the dying man's room, and associates from decades past show up, all clamouring for a reckoning. The audiobook is read by a full cast, including Judy Greer and Saunders himself, and published by Bloomsbury and Random House Audio. Here's a clip from the opening of the book.
What a lovely home I found myself plummeting toward, acquiring as I fell arms, hands, legs, feet, all of which, as usual, became more substantial with each passing second. Below, a fountain. At the center of the fountain, a gold-plated statue of a dog. Someone must have really loved that dog. In the mouth of the golden dog, a golden duck. The duck's beak was hanging open in death, and a pocked area in its flank seemed meant to represent the entry field of the shot cluster. I observed all of this as I plummeted past, and then my head and torso pierced the asphalt crust of a semicircular drive and lodged in the dirt below. My rear was in the air, my fresh new legs bicycling energetically. I found myself alternately clothed and unclothed. That is to say, one instant naked and the next clothed. Or to be more precise, partly clothed. Over time, that is, the elements of my outfit grew more reliably visible. My beige skirt soon became a near constant. Meanwhile, here was a burrowing worm to consider and a brown bottle shard and the rich smell of the loam now completely encasing my inverted upper half. Once in Tennessee, having landed in the more conventional upright posture, I spent 6 hours in a paddock, my head protruding above the surface of the earth, being trotted through again and again by 3 black horses and 1 roan, who never, during those hours, ceased being panicked by my presence. And yet, I had a fine success on that occasion, my charge being greatly comforted.
And thus we meet our main narrator, Jill, and we get a hint as to her role in dispensing comfort and helping people move on. She's a bit insubstantial at first, I think partly because she is separated from her own memories, and these gradually start coming back to her. It's almost like the longer she's on Earth, the more of a person she becomes. Jenny, how did you get on with this character of Jill to lead us through this story?
I listened to the audio book of this, which I really enjoyed the production value of it. I haven't listened to an audio book that has lots of sound effects and that kind of thing. So I really loved that side of it. I have to say, when I started, I went into this book completely blind. You asked us to join you on this episode, and I thought, okay, I'll just start listening to it. I did have to restart. So I did find it quite confusing to start with, and I did need to go and read a summary of the book to just give me an idea as to what was going on. But once I read that summary and then restarted, I could get into the book much more. I have to say, I, for a long time, was very stuck in the frame of mind that I didn't know why I would want to read about such an abhorrent man.
This is our dying oil tycoon.
And as the book goes on, obviously, like you're saying, Jill became a more fully formed character. And I loved reading about her perspective on life and getting to know her more, which I guess was a good point because you spend the most time with her. You're not actually in KJ Boon's head for that long, thankfully.
And he's very, I suppose, one of the things I associate Saunders with more than anything else is his ability to engage your empathy. And I think when we learn how Jill died, in quite a shocking way that wasn't anything to do with her, you can't help but feel really sorry for her. Sarah?
That was basically my favourite parts of the book, really, was those bits where he starts to unpeel who Jill is as a character. I wanted more from her. He was definitely deliberately holding back, but I really found that aspect of the story the most interesting. I was really interested in the whole back and forth with Jill and her ex-husband. And yeah, those developments that he did, I thought he did really well.
I felt there were a lot of what moments, and I was reading this on the page. I just wonder, I don't know, if I read it again, I would be interested to listen to it and just see if that was helpful. Sometimes it was something where I'd read it and then almost it would fall into place. I just have to think about it a second and I'd be able to think, oh, I see, that fits with this or that goes with this. But then every once in a while, there was something where I was just like, what? I pulled this out about halfway through the book. From the window of my charger's room, a light rectangle, longing for the wedding, landed instead on the redwood fence, where it manifested as a frustrated, malformed polygon. And obviously that's even more confusing taken completely out of context, but just made no matter how many times I stared at that paragraph, I was like, I don't know what he's talking about. Like, what is this?
Is he a letterbox? I don't know.
If I ever meet George Saunders, that will be what I'll be asking him. I'll be like, yeah, George, can we talk about the polygon? But I think in a way it shows his skill and mastery, the degree to which he's not frightened of losing you. And in fact, he really plays with that, right? Like, you've got to pay attention. It feels very playful, but at the same time, there's a lot going on. There are all these little fragments. It felt quite almost like slightly jagged, like staccato all the time. And I always felt I had to be on my toes and I could never really settle into it, except at a couple of points where I felt there was a real deepening of understanding of who Jill was and why she was there. And when I felt like I was slightly being invited to engage with her emotionally in the way that everything else felt very kept at a distance. Did you feel similarly, like held apart, or did it draw you in?
There were some very human moments in it, I thought. There was a particular moment that stuck with me with Jill when I think she's returned to her hometown and she's gone to visit the site of her grave. And when she gets there, her husband's grave is there, but also his second wife's grave is there. And I think she clocks that he got remarried very quickly after she died, and she finds that really upsetting. That really made me reflect on a situation in my own life where my best friend died very young, sadly, of cancer, and her husband had remarried within 2 years. And for us that were her close friends, it was such a shock. We were like, I can't believe how quickly he's moved on. But actually, when you stop to think about it, he's got a whole life ahead of him that he needs to live. And I can sit in my grief for as long as I want to, because I have my life and my life's continuing. And there was just moments in the book like that. And yet some moments where you're like, I don't know what's going on right now, hence me restarting it. And then other moments that felt so human that I really loved bits of it as well. It was a very polarizing book.
Yeah, I thought that bit was also really interesting, thinking about perspectives, because the dates are on the two graves, and you realise that the husband was married to his second wife 50 years or something. It was a really long. Jill is roaming the earth being the Grim Reaper or whatever, and her husband and that whole aspect of it is like all she thinks about. Whereas for him, he lived this full life and he's got children, and his second wife, obviously they had a really long marriage. So the way that he thinks about his life and the way that she thinks about his life are extremely different. And if he was to reflect, there's obviously so many more things that happened in the following 50 years. So I thought that was really interesting. I don't think I'd read something like that, this point of death where things change so much for the ghost and then the people that carry on living. So it was an interesting piece about people carrying on.
And he's very good at ghosts, Saunders.
Yeah, he loves ghosts, I've said before.
Looking in the Bardo, a ghosty.
Ghosty. Everyone's
very much. Even more overtly ghosty, actually. Because here there's more of a sense of them as spiritual beings. I think there's much more of a sense of classic religious, more like they're angels. Whereas with Lincoln and the Bardo, they really are. They're ghosts. But that sense of he's so playful with time. So you've got people who were recently deceased, and then you've got people who died centuries before, and they're all wandering around together. And I loved the way he played with that. I thought that was really good. What about the sense of why is Jill there? We learn, don't we, that she's actually there to help ease the passage of this man, KJ Boon, this rich businessman who we learn has made his money through fossil fuel industries. It's never super specific, but we learn that in the course of his flourishing commercial life, he has been a very active climate change denier, and that he has gathered together, using his commercial power and his money and influence, groups of influential people to allow the fossil fuel industries the latitude to keep on churning out the oil, keep on making money, and to keep the idea that society is dependent on this as a way of life flourishing. So that's all packed in there. I would have liked George Saunders to have taken more of a position on that. I felt like it was strangely non-judgmental, even though climate change is very emotively woven in there at certain points. What did you think about that? Sarah?
This part of the book I found, to be honest, quite uncompelling. And for the whole time that I was reading it, I was a little bit frustrated almost, where I was like, I feel like this should be more gripping to me than it is, because it's theoretically about interesting questions. And I found that I wasn't that compelled by it, to be honest. I didn't find it that interesting. It was a little bit too much at arm's length. It didn't persuade me to think that deeply, even though I could sense that was clearly the intention of the novel, was to try and ask these abstract, deep questions. But I personally really didn't find that aspect of it to be that successful. I don't know about you, Jen.
I think, like I said earlier, I was just too swept up in just not liking the man. And I didn't really understand what the point was, because he wasn't on a redemption arc at all. I felt it just was a bit meandering. Yeah, not really getting to the point. I read your outline, Kate, and I was like, God, I haven't even thought of these things. If this was the point he was trying to push, it wasn't explicit to me. Reading it, he was trying to make me think too hard, and that was the problem. I needed some guidance. Yeah,
it's that idea of confronts the biggest issues of our time, climate change, and I suppose late capitalism. He poses questions, but the book doesn't really contain any answers, and it also doesn't contain any judgments. Thinking about what is the plot, what is this narrative, and you think, oh, actually, it's a bit like Dickens' A Christmas Carol. But the point about that is that each ghost that comes, each visitation, makes Ebenezer Scrooge reflect on his life differently. And the result, at the end, there's this complete revelation and a desire to change and be different from that point on. You don't get any of that with this KJ Boon character. And in fact, he gets led off. Even the sort of difficult situation he then finds himself in when he's passed over is quite quickly ameliorated, I'd say, in a way that I found very frustrating. I was like, what is this book saying? I just don't know.
Funny you mentioned A Christmas Carol, both of you, because I don't know if you watched the interview of George Saunders on YouTube with Eric Carl Anderson, but he talked about Christmas Carol being his starting point with this novel. So he wanted to write something like A Christmas Carol. So
that was the first thing I clocked, was that I thought it was like A Christmas Carol. And then there's two characters that show up. I can't remember their names in Vigil, but they're
both called Mel.
And I apologise for possibly getting the Dickens version and the Muppets Christmas Carol version mixed up.
Iconic.
But there's Marley and Marley in the Muppets Christmas Carol who turn up, and those characters I felt quite clearly based on those same characters from the Dickens novel. So yeah, it very much reminded me of A Christmas Carol. But like UK, I just didn't ultimately see the point, because there was no redemption arc. And what I was going to say is, I couldn't remember the ending. I remember him dying, and I remember Marley and Marley coming to try and wrestle him off. And then I can't remember what happens. Did he go through some sort of, I don't know, is there redemption right at the end? I genuinely couldn't remember the final ending. And I don't really know what that says about the novel.
Yeah, she's...
I feel like Jill comes and kicks Mel and Mel, is that what they're called?
Mel and Mel, yeah.
Kicks them away, but I couldn't remember if she rescues him, or ultimately I couldn't remember the point.
Do you remember the Frenchman who is the man who invented the engine?
Yes, yeah.
So he pops up periodically throughout the book. He's quite a charismatic character. I quite liked him. But he pops up at the end, and I have a feeling he and Boon go off together. And there's a slight suggestion that he's going off to try and do what Jill does, which is comfort people and help them transition from death into life. If I'm on my deathbed and I get visited by anyone as wishy-washy as Jill, I would probably try and convey to Ted that I wanted him to gently push a pillow over my face.
What if it's a business tycoon?
And move things on. If I get Boon. In fact, you know what? Who I want? I want the Frenchman. I was quite,
He's
you know,
great.
yeah, I'd take him.
In the audiobook, he's fabulous.
I think what I wish this had more of was something, I think the connection between these serious questions about morality and climate change and how much responsibility businesses have and the kind of stakes of this abstract redemption. I think that combination was what didn't really work for me. I think I would have preferred it if he was going to be punished for something, or it was a trial, or there was like some conversation about how much guilt does he actually have. I found it a little bit too abstract for the questions that were being asked.
I feel like there is some larger statement to be made about the kind of novels that even really great writers feel able to write now. And it seems to me that it has become almost impossible to make any kind of statement or moral judgment. And poor old George Saunders, when he wrote that article about the Trump rally, it was a very fierce, emotional, incredibly vivid, insightful look at what might be motivating people who supported Trump and what, obviously, from his own position, is motivating the liberals who are anti-Trump. When you read it now, it's still an absolutely brilliant piece, but you think, he had no idea that not only Trump was going to get elected, which he did, but that he was going to get re-elected. And the sheer impossibility of understanding how that could happen, and not once but twice, and the world that we're now living in, which must be so acutely felt in America, I think is leading to these novels where even the best and brightest and most exceptional of writers just don't know what to say. I wonder if it's that. It's only because of just having read the Ben Lerner as well, where Transcription, again, it was such an interesting book, but it was almost about the impossibility of saying anything, the impossibility of knowing anything, about everything being subjective. And you're left with the feeling that you've read something that was reflecting culture back at you without really saying anything about it, which I thought in itself was interesting and felt like a shame. I was just a bit disappointed. And similarly with Vigil, that was my feeling. I love George Saunders. I think he's the best. But this felt a bit disappointing just because I wanted more from him and I maybe couldn't get fully out of expectations to really appreciate what he was trying to do. I think that's my take on it. What do you think, Luke? Good book club book?
I think good book club book with the Tolstoy paired together. I think that's the perfect book club. I think this on its own, yeah, I don't know. I think your summary is really good. I do feel it was just culture reflected back at you. And I was ultimately left feeling, what was the point? And it seems like we were all left feeling like that. And I always think a good book club book offers more to discuss and offers a polarizing opinion. I think it says a lot that all three of us felt the same.
Yeah, Sarah, you're nodding.
Yes, I agree entirely. And I also just had the thought, I'm not sure there are that many books where all three of us would agree completely. That's a bit of a twist, maybe, Kate, you didn't expect in this episode.
And can I, just as a final point, not great for radio, I know, but can I just say briefly about the cover? Our UK cover, I think, is so wishy-washy. It doesn't say anything about the book. It's this grand house, like a kind of colonial type big American mansion with this sort of pink dramatic sky above it. The US one actually has much more of a sense. It's very dramatic sky and you can see this figure falling through it and it looks quite like sort of
into earth.
Yeah, right? That maybe you could argue is slightly obvious, but at least it feels like it's saying something. This English one,
it's not good.
Except that I think they too read the book and were just like, where can we go with this? But you know where they should have gone? They should have gone with the fountain in the courtyard, with the gold statue of the dog, with the duck in its beak. That's the image you put on the cover, right? Like, where? I don't understand why they didn't go there. Anyway, another small disappointment of mine. All right.
Good. Sorry, I was just looking at the US cover. You're right. Yeah, not
Like the US
uncompelling.
cover, it's good.
Often the way the US ones are so much nicer. And you in Holland, Sarah, you get the US ones, don't you? I remember that lovely ABC bookshop in Amsterdam where they've got so many really lovely American editions.
Yeah, we tend to have both. Bookshops tend to pick their poison, basically, because you can get both here. There's a bookshop that I really like where I used to live that would have each one. The bookseller would, I guess, was just letting people choose their own covers.
Oh, I love
so they would
that.
have the UK and the
Oh, that'd be
US
my
one.
dream shop. In fact, you know what I wanted to do?
Cool.
I wanted to start a bookshop here in London, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to, because I just always love
cool.
love the choice, right? Let us come on then to The Death of Ivan Ilyich by Leo Tolstoy. The Death of Ivan Ilyich is the masterpiece of his late fiction. The book is about many things: the tyranny of bourgeois niceties, the terrible weak spots of the human heart, and it's about death. But more than anything, it deals with the consequences of living without meaning, that is, without a true and abiding connection to one's life. Now, am I right in saying you've both read this quite recently? I have read this, but quite a long time ago, and in a terrible human failing moment of confession, I have to say I did not have time to reread it. So all I can tell you that has stayed with me from the last time, we talked about it, I had my philosopher friend Johnny Thompson on, and we read it and discussed it in that episode. So there is an episode where I'm on record with some very deep and comprehensive thoughts about the death of Ivan Ilyich. But the only thing that remains
Edit
to
them
me...
in, Kate, and make us seem like we're not listening to you.
No, the only thing that remains to me from that conversation was that you have to be very careful around curtains and that someone dies. So perhaps you guys could fill me in, because I know the reason it felt like a good fit was because Saunders himself cited it as an influence.
Okay, sure. So it's a fairly short story. I think it's about 90, 100 pages, about a man called Ivan Ilyich who slowly comes to the realization that he's dying. And over the course of the book, he starts to lose more and more of his functions. He starts to become more and more bedridden. At first, he wars against this idea that he's dying. And over time, he becomes at peace with it, is not quite the word, but he grows slowly to accept what's happening. And I guess one of the interesting parallels with Vigil is that you do see, although you're hearing it from his perspective, you can see the household moving on around him. So it does have this kind of echoes of Jill, I would say, where life is ticking on, even though he's thinking very much about himself, about his own issues, and he's really focused on his body and what's happening with his body. In the background, there's this certain rhythm to it all. Life is ticking on in the background. So I guess it makes you think of Jill for me.
It is quite a Saunders-esque mishap, isn't it, that puts him in this state. From memory, isn't he hanging curtains? He's got these lovely velvet curtains that he's acquired, and he's hanging them himself. You should never do home DIY. And he slips and hits his head, and then that leads to this chain of events that eventually finishes him off.
I feel like he hurts himself, but ultimately I think he's died of some sort of cancer, I'd have thought. But they keep blaming it on an incident that he's had. I think it's with the curtains. I can't quite remember. He's very into his home decor. This is my first Tolstoy.
Oh, really?
I really quite enjoyed this one. I own Anna Karenina and I own War and Peace, and those great big books are just sat on my shelf looking at me. Beautiful editions, but I've not read them. So yeah, this was a really nice introduction for me. He's quite funny. I found it quite funny. He does little things. I can't remember what game they're playing. It's not whist, but they play some sort of card game, and in brackets he'll write funny little anecdotes. I really enjoyed that. I had a good time reading this one. At first, with this book, I had the same feeling as to, why am I reading a story from this awful man's perspective? Because he's horrible. He's horrible to his wife. He's horrible how he talks about her. I think at one point they mentioned the fact that 2 of their children have died in quite a young age, but he's always just thinking about himself and how awful his wife is to him, what an inconvenience she is when she's pregnant. I was like, I don't want to read from this man's perspective. And then obviously it takes a turn because he's becoming unwell. It's in a time period where you know the medical establishment is not going to be able to help him. And I did feel empathy for him by the end. And it is that point, Sarah, that you were making, is that at least he reflects on his life while he's still alive and while he's dying. And he's still very self-centered and self-pitying, but you do get the sense that people are cracking on with their lives, and his wife certainly doesn't care, nor should she. But I did feel sorry for him in the end. It was sad to witness somebody's life kind of end like that. Sorry, I'm being handed a bag of Haribo.
Nice.
Thank you.
People don't bring me Haribo when I'm recording. It's a good setup you've got there.
It's a regular occurrence during our recordings.
It happens every now and again. I demand Haribo.
Andy's building you bookshelves.
I know. I'm
Talk
married
about
well.
life ending. The funny thing about Tolstoy is that his family situation, it is quite interesting, and he was really awful to his wife. Although I think in the early days, maybe he loved her. And they certainly had lots of children. And I think they also had children who died. But later on, he just was more and more awful. And actually, there's a very funny Elif Batuman article, I think it is, essay. I would urge anyone to seek out. I'll see if I can find it. I think it's online. I think she wrote it for Harper's and you can read it. In which she has to come up with a reason for going to a conference at Yasnya Polanya, which was his estate in Russia. She doesn't have the money to go any other way, but if she can get a place as part of this conference, then her travel will be paid. And she comes up with this idea for a paper, which is about whether or not Tolstoy was poisoned. And the main suspect is his put upon, very frustrated wife. It's so good and it's so funny, but it does give you quite a lot of insight into Tolstoy's domestic arrangements.
Yeah.
But so the thing about Tolstoy, the thing that makes Anna Karenina so remarkable, the thing that makes War and Peace so remarkable, and the thing that's so hard to square away when you know that actually as a human being he was pretty terrible, not that nice to anyone around him, is the humanity that courses through it. And as you say, his ability to see into people's hearts and to invoke your empathy as a reader. And even when people don't behave well, somehow you still respond to them on a level as human beings. And I think for that reason, it feels so immediate when you read Tolstoy, even though it was written so long ago. He's one of those writers who was writing about things that are as true then as they are now. And that's the thing that endures. And to me, that's very much something that Saunders also has that ability.
Yeah, I'm very much with Jenny that I found Ivan to be a much more compelling character than our Mr. Boon, I think he was called in Vigil. And yeah, I agree. This book is very Tolstoy. I really liked Tolstoy. And this book is very Tolstoy in that you get this cast of characters who are all mildly unpleasant and none of them are particularly bad. No one's cartoonishly bad and no one's cartoonishly good. You just have all these unpleasant people. And he somehow manages to conjure up all this empathy in you for them. And he does such a good character study. He's so good at people and understanding people.
Is it more interesting because Tolstoy is making more of a moral judgment, more of a value judgment about him than Saunders is?
Yes, I think he does. And I think there's a lot more characterization in Ivan. So I think you feel a lot like you get to know him a lot more. And his motivations are a lot clearer. And I feel like this war within him is a lot clearer. He just felt a lot more like a real character. But he's really good at understanding what drives people, what motivates people, and he's really good at writing reactions that feel very human. So it feels like, yeah, this book is very Tolstoy. And he does this great thing where he will contextualize behavior very subtly. For example, you have a lot of scenes with tension between Ivan and his wife, and then he drops in this background information for the reader about how their children have just died and this is happening in the background, and you're suddenly, as you're reading it, like, oh, so this is actually a house that's not that he's annoyed with his wife about what she's wearing or whatever. This is actually there's something else that's happening in the background that's far deeper. So he was very good at that. And I was wondering as I was reading it, because as you said, Kate, he's famously an arsehole. Is this also fiction? Did he know? Is this supposed to be him? When was this? I forgot to look up when he wrote this in the context of his life. But yeah, I was wondering what was happening here.
It was described as a masterpiece of his late fiction. So I took from that it's before he went slightly nuts and started churning out all that religious non-fiction.
Okay.
I was thinking about the subject of death being the ultimate thing that every human must face at some time in their lives. I thought George Saunders had a beautiful way of writing about this ultimate moment. Soon it would come, accompanied by disbelief and panic, and she would find herself on the wrong side of a rapidly closing door, everything she had ever known and loved out of reach, over there, beyond it. And that recurs, that exact paragraph, a couple of times in the book, and I was very struck by it. Yeah, I know. It's a scary thing to think about, death, isn't it? No one wants to dwell on it, but at the same time, putting it like that, I thought was a rather beautiful way of expressing it, and perhaps the regrets that you might feel in that moment. But mainly, we just have to seize every moment, right? Live every day as if it's your last. Don't try and put up your own curtains.
I think that you pairing these two books together, it really had me reflecting on what it means to follow through on the trajectory of your own life. I don't want to reach my deathbed having never paused and reflected on what I could change now and how I could reassess my life now. And I think that was exactly what these characters didn't do until they were dying. And that's one of my biggest fears, is that I will die having not done the things in life that I want to do. And you can only make those changes now. And I think the moral of reading these two books together was great. And I really enjoyed reflecting on them both more than I'd enjoyed the reading experience of Vigil, I have to say. But the two together, perfect book club.
In terms of life being, we don't know how long, and not wanting to waste any of it on reading bad books or the wrong books, what would you recommend to people for something to follow on? I was thinking something in the zone. I've got one to kick us off if you want a bit of thinking time.
I've got a slightly off the wall one, so I'd let you two go first.
I haven't thought of, I still can't think of one, so you guys go and I'll see if I can think of something.
So it's not easy. I think the thing you want to recommend with Saunders is just other Saunders. If you haven't read Lincoln in the Bardo, it's such a beautiful miracle of a book. It really is so special. But also 10th of December, his short stories are absolutely incredible. Any Saunders you could pick up and you'd have a good time. But I was thinking about, okay, other writers then who feel like perhaps they're going into slightly similar territory. And I was glancing through my shelves and I picked out this book called Beautyland by Marie-Hélène Bertino, which was one where it did very well in America. I felt like it was on everyone's radar. It was talked about a lot. I kept seeing it on best of lists. I read it because my friend Christopher, Sony Dan Books, another podcaster friend, recommended it. And I absolutely loved it. It is such a gorgeous book. It's really special. The main character is a young girl. It's sort of a coming of age novel, I guess. Thinks that she's an alien. As a child, she recognizes that she is different. She possesses knowledge of a faraway planet. The arrival of a fax machine enables her to contact her extraterrestrial relatives, beings who have sent her to report on the oddities of Earthlings. And you don't know if it's like a child's fantasy or if it's actually true. It says, for years, as she moves through the world and makes a life for herself among humans, she dispatches transmissions on the terrors and surprising joys of their existence. Then, at a precarious moment, a beloved friend urges Adina to share her messages with the world. Is there a chance she is not alone? Marie-Hélène Bertino's Beautyland is a novel of startling originality about the fragility and resilience of life on our Earth and in our universe. It's a remarkable evocation of the feeling of being in exile at home, and it introduces a gentle, unforgettable alien. What's really wonderful about it is its warmth and this idea, almost classic idea, of an alien coming and observing the world and what would they make of it. And so it's all about looking at things that are quite ordinary, but the way that she's seeing them and considering them really holds them up. And it's a book that is just full of almost like the beautiful chaos of the world and contemporary life. And I just loved it, and I can't recommend it highly enough. And I felt like it had a bit of Saunders' quirky magic to it as well.
That sounds great.
It's so good.
I've not heard of it. Sounds really good.
Of course we haven't, Jen.
No, I don't.
Jenny's now going to recommend something that neither you or I have heard, or Sarah.
Yeah, apologies for this, but this is what I do. And if you listen to the podcast, you'll be used to this as well. I can't think of a book. I recommend a film. And I'm going to recommend a film called Palm Springs, which came out in 2020. It's a sci-fi time loop romance. It's about a guy called Niles who gets stuck in a time loop, and he's reliving the same day over and over again. And it's the day of his best friend's wedding. He's the best man, and he hooks up with the bride's sister, but he accidentally gets her caught in the time loop as well. And so they start reliving this day together and living it differently every day. There's the classic third act of will they, won't they end up together? But because he's been in this time loop for so long, he just does whatever he wants. And he makes each day different, and he doesn't give a crap about the morality of what he's doing because he's destined to relive it again and again. So he goes through this almost redemption arc as well once he starts falling in love with this girl, and changes how he lives that same day and changes his life. It's a good modern twist on the reassessing your life story and how you want to live your life going forward. That's what I fall back on when I can't think of a book. It's a film. But yeah, it's a good one.
That sounds great. And actually that taps into a resolution I've had recently, which is to try and watch more films, because I just don't watch anything. And I just feel like there's this whole world I'm really missing out on because I just spend all my time reading.
I'm trying to get Sarah in. I'm
getting
bring
there.
Sarah into the movie watching world.
I have thought of a recommendation. Whilst we're talking, I've got 2 recommendations for a similar book. Speaking of paired books, these are 2 books that are very much, in my mind, paired. One is Northwoods by Daniel Mason. The other one is Storyland by Catherine McKinnon. These books are both set on the same piece of land over time. So you're fixed in one place and it leaps forward. Storyland leaps forward quite a fair bit, and then Northwoods leaps forward in shorter 10, 15 years at a time. And they are both about the impact that you have on the world and how small that is, and how your little piece of the world and your little where you live and your backyard and all that kind of thing, how much that changes across time. Northwoods is also a little bit ghosty, so if you like that element of John Saunders, it's got the nice Saunders ghost element I think that you would really like. And they both really make you think about the life that you have, how short it is, you as a person on the earth that's just one of a huge number of people. And they both gave me these nice, deep, reflective feelings. Both would be excellent pub books, I think. Especially Northwoods, I think, is very divisive because it's a little experimental. So,
I love Northwoods. It was great.
Yeah. Storyland is Australian, so if you're in Australia, then try and get your hands on a copy of that. But otherwise, Northwoods by Daniel Mason is, I think really good.
Fantastic. I love those recommendations. I love having you both on. This has been so nice.
It's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed it.
We should do some more
I love
mashups.
you doing the outline as well, Kate. I was like, oh...
She's such a pro.
This is what I love.
This is special.
Because I love going on other people's shows because it's such a delight, isn't it? Get to just do the fun part, which is the chat, without having to do any of the work. And now I've got to go off and edit this, right? Whereas you guys, you just go and live your life.
Good luck, Kate.
No, I will have a very nice time doing it. Yeah, thank you so much. This has been really fun. That's nearly it for this episode. And if you want to hear more from Sarah and Jenny, you'll find them over at the Bookcast Club in your podcast feed. In addition to Vigil by George Saunders and The Death of Ivan Ilyich by Leo Tolstoy, we also mentioned Beautyland by Marie-Helene Bertino. Jenny flagged up the film Palm Springs, starring Andy Samberg and Christy Milotti. And Sarah recommended Northwoods by Daniel Mason and Storyland by Catherine McKinnon. Check the show notes for full listings, and you'll also find a link to our Patreon, where, if you join as a paid subscriber, you can be part of our book club, get access to a brilliant archive of extra shows, chat with other book club review listeners, who, as I'm sure you can imagine, are a delightful bunch, and support me financially in making the podcast. A big welcome and thank you to recent subscribers Sebastian Tudor, Christina Rowe, Claire Hutchinson, Susan Charica, Josie LeBon, Claire Duncan, and all the other new members who've joined up over the past couple of months. It's such a wonderful community and a source of many of my best reading tips and recommendations. Next up, Laura's joining me for an episode devoted to the joys of secondhand book shopping. Whether it's the thrill of a bargain or stumbling across some unexpected gems, we're sharing some favourite places to shop and much-loved treasures from our bookshelves. We're also meeting W.B. Gooderham, a man who has built up a delightful collection of books based on the handwritten inscriptions on the flyleaves. Voices coming back to us from readers past. Until then, thanks for listening, and I wish you all happy reading and happy book clubbing.